Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Stay Ahead of Regulatory Changes with FieldTech, Built to Bend. I'm Jake Freewald. I'm Head of Product Marketing here at Fulcrum. Got a pretty big agenda for you today, but I can put it into 3 bullet points based on the goal for the webinar overall. So the goal is to understand what can be done with technology today to mitigate the impact of regulatory uncertainty. So to get to that, we've got to talk about regulatory uncertainty first and its business effects. Then we talk about what the options are for moving forward. How are we going to deal with that uncertainty? And then think about, okay, what can we do with technology today that's going to make a difference? What are those technologies and what can we do with them? So that's the goal. That's the agenda. Let's get right into it by talking about regulatory uncertainty and its business effects. This is an amazing topic. I gave a webinar about a month ago in February about some general purpose requirements for regulated businesses. And one of the things that has been really just an amazing set of developments is the NEPA compliance or NEPA compliance, the founding law of the EPA. And this is probably the thing that has most of our clients talking right now. What are we going to do with respect to environmental protection? And some of the reasons for that uncertainty comes from President Trump's executive order of the 20th, the first day he was sworn into office. Catherine Scarlett had a memo on the 19th of February, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. There was a proposed rule for the removal of certain implementing regulations on the 25th, and those set the expectations for change. Just to give you a sense of how much change we're talking about, this is rather the nepa.gov homepage today. It was actually last night, but I checked to make sure it was still like this. And it says go to whitehouse.gov/CEQ in order to get to the Council on Environmental Quality. And that's what you would have seen on the 19th of January. But on the 20th of January forward, it looks like this. It's directly linking to the White House. So the expectation is for really, really significant change. That was the expectation that was set. In the month since my last webinar, Lee Zeldin has been appointed head of the EPA, and we've seen even more massive changes. Now, the guidance I should back up and say that the guidance that was given related to the executive order came from Catherine Scarlett's memo, talking about following your existing practices and procedures, consistent with the text of NEPA, the executive order, and this guidance. So do what you've always done, do everything that's consistent with what you've done, but make sure that you're following the new requirements in the executive order and this guidance as well. Well, what is that guidance and what does that mean? How much change do I have to make to the existing practices and procedures to keep them consistent with the text of these things? It's quite a big unknown. When Zeldin was appointed head of the EPA, he started issuing statements. This is all from the press announcements page on EPA.gov since the 12th of March. This is, I'll just go through this really quickly because I'm going to put up ultimately 4 different pagefuls of information. This one you can see revising waters of the United States rule. On the very bottom is the beginning of it. EPA launches biggest deregulatory action in US history. I'm just going to highlight a couple of these as I go through that are more relevant for the specific industries that Fulcrum targets, but there's a ton more. So that's one. This page has, for example, wastewater regulations for oil and gas extraction. This one has a reconsideration of the risk management plan, talking about safety and competitiveness. And this one talks about catastrophic wildfires, trying to decrease the risk of that. So a huge number of statements just since the 12th of this month, and I'm sorry, that should be 2025. It doesn't say this month, it should be 2025. Anyway, Zeldin said, combined, these announcements represent the most momentous day in the history of the EPA, and he may well be right on that front. So naturally, when you look at the news reporting that comes out from that, one of the big takeaways is that EPA chaos is causing major disruption. And that's happening especially in those highly regulated industry like oil and gas, power, utilities, and water. But I'm not sure that everybody feels the same way about that. That statement might have been wrong. If you look at the Dow Jones, for example, or the NASDAQ, they've suffered much worse than utility industry stocks have, which implies a certain amount of confidence in the industry. The blue line at the top there is the Vanguard Utilities Index Fund. So it's just a basket of utility companies. And it's actually done reasonably well over the course of the past 3 months. I know that's a little hard to see, so I'm going to pop up some specifics. Right there where A is the Trump inauguration. Right there where B is that memo that I quoted from a few moments ago, where I kind of highlighted the uncertainty. C is where the Zeldin memo went out and all of the announcements were about the most momentous day in EPA history. And there we were last night. That's the latest information I could give you. So if you look at the expectations for the industry, there's an expectation for disruption on the one hand, but also an expectation for some ability to keep the lights on and keep things flowing, and maybe expecting some good results from the deregulation that's happening as well. So it's not clear whether everything that's going on is a really good thing or if it could have major issues for us. And so here's some of the mitigating factors. If you think about the chaos, here's some mitigating factors that may not be may make it so that these things aren't as big of a deal as we think. So for example, continuing high energy demand. If you're in an electrical utility, high energy demand is expected to be continuing onward based on the need for data centers, the amount of energy that's being put to AI. If the Trump plan for continued industrialization of America continues, then perhaps we'll see more demand for industrial activities in the US. Regardless of what you're in, water, environmental, electricity, whatever, the fact that there may be reduced regulation, reduced paperwork, streamlined processes, that doesn't mean that there are no standards. You still have to make sure that you're following the standards that exist, even if those standards are simpler. In addition, federal standards aren't the only things out there. State and local regulatory requirements are still in place, and we still have to abide by those as well. And then finally, of course, people just expect that things are going to be clean, safe, well-run, managed effectively. So the industry expectations also would make us think that we're going to be required to keep some set of standards in place, and we're going to have to keep meeting those standards. So if there's a great deal of uncertainty, then uncertainty means that we're not sure whether things are really good or bad. We're not sure what's going to happen next. Is our workload going to go up or does it go down? Same with all the other factors that are here. Any one of these things could occur. And because those things could occur, any one of those things could occur, we have to face the fact that there are going to be business effects of that uncertainty. So, for example, we'll see a lot of stasis and reductions in things. We'll see cutbacks potentially in training and hiring. We'll see some reduced technology experimentation because we're a little afraid that when we try out new technologies, we're going to see that we spent money where we didn't really have the money to spend, and we're not going to be able to take advantage of the technology that we expect, that we really feel the way we feel we need to. We might bid less aggressively because we're not sure how much business is coming in and how it's going to come in. We might be less aggressive about undercutting our competitors or things of that nature. We might be narrowing the target markets in it. And in case all of it wasn't starting to seem depressing enough, I'm just going to make it very clear that I don't believe any of this by saying we could just be immiserating ourselves in forces that are beyond our control. To me, this is not a set of business effects. This is a set of choices. And when we're thinking about what we're going to do to deal with the uncertainty in front of us, we have to be thinking clearly about the choices that we are making during uncertainty, not thinking about the effect that this has on our business as if it's something over which we have no control. So let's think about that for a second. If we think about what could happen to us from, let's say, a budget perspective, maybe our budgets could tighten. If our budgets tighten, people like say, classic business line, which some of us believe and some of us don't, depending on who's saying it, you're going to have to do more with less, or you're going to have to do the same with less, okay? If, on the other hand, we get a budget increase, that when people put money in, they expect some kind of return out, better quality, better volume of work, better competition, right? There could be a number of different things that people expect to get out of that budget increase, and they expect that multiplier. Well, which of those things are we going to have to deal with? If we're talking about staff could also be decreased or increased. If it's decreased, we're going to need to get more productivity out of each staff member in order to handle the work necessary. But if there's an increase, then we have a different problem. I don't need to manage the people that I've got. I mean, I do. I don't need to manage them as closely as I need to manage the people who are coming on board now. They're new, they don't understand the business. I don't get the consistency from them that I would from people who have been doing this for a long time. How do I bring that staff on board, make sure that we're getting the results from them that they need and the productivity that they need? So I may need to deal with either one of those situations. Regardless of whether budgets are tightened or staff increases or decreases or whatever, regardless of what else is happening, we know that there are going to be changes in documentation for our clients. They're going to want some information in specific ways. We know that federal government changes are coming, and there will probably be reactions to those changes at the federal level with state and local government changes as well. So we just should know that those changes are coming, and we should prepare for those changes. And I'd like you to notice that the things that I'm talking about here that seem opposites, they're not necessarily misaligned. And I'll talk about that more in just a second. How do we align what we do to handle either a tightening or an increase of our budgets, of our staff, of anything else? And one of the ways that we do that is by adopting technologies in the right way. I 100% agree that we can't just willy-nilly adopt technology, but we have to adopt technology in the right way. So let's think about specifically the staff increase and decrease, just to make it really concrete. How do I align the technology that I'm investing in or looking at with the requirements that come to us differently depending on whether or not there's an increase or a decrease? If I look at what I'm going to need on an increase side, I'll need to bring more people on board. Those people don't know the business. Therefore, I need to make sure that they've got easy to learn procedures and step-by-step instructions to do every task that they need to do. That's what's going to help get me the consistency I need. It's going to be what helps get them productive immediately. I may need to organize those people by some boundary. It might be a state boundary or some other kind of regulatory boundary. Maybe it's based on whether they're doing more wetlands determination kind of work or whether they're doing, working with construction of various kinds of in parts of the business. They may be organized in different ways. How do I manage to organize them? How do I potentially manage to surge people from one part of the organization to another? Another requirement is administration, right? If I'm bringing a lot of people on board, we all know that when you bring a lot of people on board, you also see a lot of people leaving at the same time. You see people churning very quickly. They get in, they decide I'm not going to do this anymore, and they get out almost immediately. So I need to be able to onboard people, offboard people, manage who's got access to what technologies, who has what responsibilities, and so on. So how do I easily administer this increase in staff along with the staff that I currently have? And then I have the whole consistency problem. I don't want people pencil whipping. I want to make sure everybody's doing things the same way. So those easy to learn procedures up top have to be standard operating procedures for the people who are currently working with me as well as the new ones. And I might need to be able to say, okay, back in the back office, I've got some supervisors. They take a trip out to tag along with various workers at various times. Am I able to do that in a more remote way so that they can supervise more different teams of people all at the same time? And then finally, I don't necessarily want somebody who's new to have to recognize when there's a problem. In a perfect world, I know when there's a problem, I can detect that there's a problem somehow automatically, and I can raise an alert without the person out there in the field who's new having to do it on their own. So the requirements here are pretty strong for process management, administration, standardization, perhaps customization based on what state you're in, and doing some things automatically. Let's take a look at what happens when we're decreasing our staff. The major issue there is going to be increased productivity. How do I get greater productivity out of the people that I have? Maybe one of the things we can do is send fewer specialists out to the field. I'm thinking here of the fact that we have a lot of clients where there's a GIS specialist who will occasionally go out using GIS technology to do GIS-oriented work. Inspections of some sort, mapping out boundaries, whatever it may be. What if I can send fewer specialists out to the field and I can collect that information from standard people, standard field workers in some other way? Reducing supervision of those people. Sounds a little like the reducing of supervision or the spreading out of supervision for the increase side. How do I avoid mistakes? Mistakes are one of the biggest costs in field work. Doing rework, it doesn't just mean that you have to do the work over again. It means you send the truck out again, and it's something, $230 an hour or whatever that might be. That can be one of your most expensive problems. So how do I help them avoid mistakes? I'm not going to repeat or read through all of these, but you get the idea. All of the things that we have to do in order to make people good when they first onboard are part of what we have to do to make people more productive in general. These two things align more than they don't align. The technology that you need to do to make this happen effectively on a budget is one of the things that's most necessary to get a good result regardless of outcome. Regardless of inputs, I guess I should say, regardless of whether it's an increase or a decrease. So we're not talking about one thing or another. Whether you're adapting to better or worse conditions, you're always going to need well-managed processes in the field, using field data. When the field data goes back to the office, that process needs to be managed well, providing data out to the field, etc. You need field tech to improve consistent productivity. Field tech, I'll have a slide on this in a minute, is software or hardware that is bought by the field, acquired by the field, and managed by the field for field-specific requirements, right? So these are things that you understand better than anybody else, the things that you can't necessarily get from IT as effectively. It's technology that helps you do the things that you need to do in your day-to-day job. So you're going to need some kind of field tech to improve that consistency and productivity out in the field. The data that you get from the field, the data that you put out to the people in the field to give them context is going to be very important. The data that you get from the field is going to be very important to make all of this work. So regardless of what we're facing, regardless of where the change comes from or what the specific changes are, you will always need at least these 4 things when it comes to dealing with that change. So based on that thought, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm going to need somehow, and when the change comes, I'm going to need to adapt. You really have 3 choices about what you can do. 1, you can do nothing at all. You can say, I'm going to wait till the changes happen. I'm going to see how I have to adapt. 2, you can place your bets on specific outcomes, thinking, okay, I'm going to get an increase in business over here, and I'm going to see a decrease in business over there. You know, maybe I'll get an increase in the environmental consulting business because I'm seeing change there. So I'm going to be talking more about regulatory compliance and stuff like that with some people, but I'll see a decrease in actually sending people out in the field to do it. You might place bets on those specific outcomes. Or you can move to a more flexible posture in general. Take the people that you have right now, start gearing them up to use a more adaptable set of technologies, make sure that you're already getting consistency from what you're dealing with, and be ready to pivot when you need consistency, but from a new kind of regulation or a new change in that regulation. Naturally, I think the best way to go here is to move toward that more flexible posture. And the reason that it's important to move to that more flexible posture is that other people probably are worried enough to say, you know what, I'm going to hold off. It's a very natural human thing to hold off while things are uncertain. We don't like change as a species, and we don't like to make strong decisions when change is going on. If you work in an organization that has competitors, if you're not a utility company yourself, but if you're working for a company that is supplying services or products to those utility companies, then now is the time to move, because other people are going to be static and you have the opportunity to change while changing is good, if you will. So with all that in mind, right, that's the backdrop for what we're working in, the regulatory changes that we're facing and the set of things that we're going to need from a technology or set of technologies to help us, and then what we can do. Let's talk about the technologies themselves that make a difference to how we're going to be able to accomplish our mission over the course of the next 3, 6, 12 months. I'm going to start with that definition I said of field tech, just to remind you: hardware, software that is managed by the field, acquired by the field, managed by the field, solving field-specific problems. I come from a vendor. You should always keep that in mind. Whenever a vendor's talking, they have a perspective. But my perspective here is for one piece of the overall field tech ecosystem, right? We're really focused on process management and data collection. But there's a ton of other field tech that you have out there. Things like drones and 3D cameras, which a lot of our clients use. Things like sensors, IoT sensors, weather stations, safety equipment, to measure gas in a confined space, whatever it may be. And of course, your GIS. All of those things that are acquired by the field and managed by the field to solve field-specific problems. So I'm talking about a very wide ecosystem. This is my set of opinions based on my perspective, but the perspective that we should be looking at the problem in is much broader than Fulcrum. It's actually a really big set of requirements that you're going to be facing. And although I'd love, as a vendor, to talk about my technology just like throughout this thing, and we'll get to a discussion of what Fulcrum does, requirements have to come first. So Fulcrum and everything else has to be pushed in the background for a minute while we think about what the requirements are to deal with the regulatory change that we're involved in. I'm going to start by thinking about the field process execution. If we can't do that easily, then we can neither, again, using my example, onboard people quickly, nor improve the productivity of the people who are out in the field. The process execution has to be easy in a variety of ways. First of all, it needs to be reliable. It needs to be the kind of thing where if I'm collecting data out in the field and I don't have a connection, then it captures all the information and reliably pushes that information back to the office so that they can process that stuff effectively. If it's not reliable, it's a major problem. Our CEO likes to say, you know, if I had a bank that was just the best bank in the world, but it you know, lost a little bit of my money sometimes, every now and then I'd be losing a couple $100 from my checking account, or, you know, a couple of $1,000 here or there, then we wouldn't use that bank. So the reliability is one of the #1 things that you require for field execution of important processes. Another is the simplicity of those processes. This is true in 2 ways. First, for the new person who's onboarding, it needs to be simple enough for them to understand what they have to do, even if they don't have 20 years worth of experience. How do you give that rookie the experience of a 20-year veteran? That's really the question there. So giving them the ability to just kind of tap through what they're doing, understand easily what they're doing, and ideally put in some backstops for them to make sure that they're executing correctly and they know when they've done something wrong. All of those things are important. That's one way simplicity is important. Another way simplicity is important is for the person who's been there for 20 years or more. We frequently find that in a lot of the industries we work in, a lot of the companies we do business with, there are people who have been doing things a certain way for a very long time. They like paper and pencil. They like the process that they've been going through. It may be an ugly process in some ways, but it's what they know, and they would much rather rely on what they know than make a change that they see as risky. And the simpler you can make the process of adopting a technology, the better off they're going to be. I'm just going to tout one feature just for a second. I know, but whatever. I'm going to tout one feature just for a second about how this has been helpful. We recently launched something called Audio Fast Fill. It's a way of using AI to parse what you say into your phone, not to fill out one field, but to fill out this checkbox and put those numbers in and you know, make some comments. Yes, some plain text like you would do with traditional text to speech, speech to text, but also to fill out all the rest of your form. So it's not one thing, it's everything in the form. Being able to have somebody say, just like they would say to a scribe, here's the data that I need you to put in, that improves adoption for people who otherwise are really not happy typing with 2 thumbs. So that simplicity of processes for people who've been around the block for you for a long time and are highly valued for what they know, that's really important for them too, just as much as it is for the new people that you're hiring on. Consistency of results is kind of like reliability. If you don't get consistency of results, then you're going to get differences between new people, old people, this area, this client, this project, that project. And the consistency of results becomes really important to be able to make improvements and adapt to change within your own organization. So that's ease of field process execution. Let's talk about field process management for a second. There's a lot that goes into that too. One of them is automation and integration. We want to be able to take the data that we provide, which is high value, and automatically push it into your GIS, for example, or automatically push it into your asset management system. Being able to automate that process means there's less for people to know and less for people to do and fewer places for people to make mistakes. Machines are very good at automated, repetitive tasks that humans are typically not as good at. So that automation and integration becomes really important. Geospatial intelligence is incredibly important here too. For any other part of a business, geospatial intelligence is less important. Not that it's not important, but it's less important. For people in the field, you probably know this already, it's really mission critical, knowing exactly where that pole is, knowing exactly what part of the substation you are standing in when you saw the issue that you were seeing, whatever it may be. All of that geospatial intelligence is really important to people. And then finally, being able to scale. And I mean scale in 2 ways here. One is technically, I need to be able to add a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of records, a whole bunch of data, a whole bunch of pictures, a whole bunch of GIS locations, whatever it may be. And I need to be able to scale the people who are onboarding. I need to be able to say, okay, well, if I'm going to add 5 people or 10 people here, then I need to be able to easily do that over the course of a couple of minutes instead of doing, having a 5-minute process for each one of those people, so that when you're shifting the number of people that you have, that's going to be very important for you as well, to be able to handle both, ups and downs on the admin side. So both technical scalability and administrative scalability are both really important for that field process management. Those are kind of the requirements that we see for being field oriented. Those are all really critical for field oriented processes. We can break that down a little bit more into 2 different areas: rigor and flexibility. No matter what you're doing, whether it is an inspection or whether it's an installation of a piece of equipment, you are going to need rigorous processes. And because we know we're dealing with change, including regulatory change, we know that we need to be flexible enough to adapt to that change. Let's make this concrete for a second. I need to standardize the specific processes that I'm dealing with, because I've got existing practices and procedures. I need to continue to implement them in a standardized way. Until change comes, that's still your basis. When I document information, typically for my clients, right, I might be producing documentation for a regulator, whatever kind of reporting that I'm doing, that process documentation and proof that I complied with what I needed to do is really important. I always think about here, vegetation management preventing wildfires, for example. I need to be able to prove that the vegetation management wasn't a problem. I did my job. That's therefore the wildfire that was sparked didn't come from my power line or whatever it might be. And finally, of course, we have to avoid any kind of penalties for non-compliance with current rules. So we want to make sure that those standards are upheld specifically. Standards are great, but we know change is coming, and we know that changes happen across different boundaries. So I need to be able to customize. So for example, when that regulatory change comes, I need to be able to update those practices and procedures that I'm currently following. I need to do that immediately. And I need to be able to continue from one day to the next, even though those practices have changed. I can't have a complete break between the systems occurring just because I have certain regulations one day and certain regulations the next. Things have to keep working, even if there are different steps. And of course, I need to, just like I need to avoid non-compliance penalties for current rules, when they change, I need to avoid non-compliance penalties there too. So standardization and customization are both simultaneously needed. It's not an either or. Both of these things have to happen at one time. Rigorous and flexible. You have to balance that. And that's a really crucial part of being able to adapt to change in a functional, thoughtful, effective way. Let's make that a little bit, let's make it a little bit more concrete around geospatial requirements. So I'm thinking here of anything that you could be doing, let's say maintenance SOPs for, just as one set of examples. Here's a couple. Out in the field, there are geospatial requirements for things like base maps, feature service layers. If you're not familiar with that, it's just a way of getting geospatial data related to certain kinds of features in the environment on your mobile device. That provides context to the field workers, so they understand: am I working in a special zone, in a especially hazardous zone? Which district am I working in, et cetera, et cetera. You also typically need some kind of asset data from the system of record. I'm thinking here of enterprise asset management systems, for example. They would contain the locations and attributes of the data of the assets that I'm looking at, and I might need to georeference from various kinds of plans that I'm dealing with. For example, if I'm looking at that solar field repair and construction, then I might be looking at that for as-built inspections. That's what the field needs. The field needs to get that data down on their devices while they're out there. What the GIS team needs is, first of all, more time. They spend a lot of time supporting the field, and that's taking away from some of the tasks that they frequently see as more important or more beneficial that only they can do, such as geospatial analysis. So, building maps and that sort of thing. So giving them more time would be really helpful. Validating various kinds of information, including the location, getting lines such as power lines or pipelines, polygons such as drainage areas and extensive species like invasive species and things like that. The GIS team needs basically more and better geospatial information, along with the fact that they need more time. So those are some of the geospatial requirements that are out there with respect to the technologies we need to adopt. And then finally, I'd like to talk about integration requirements. Just blowing through this a little quickly, but if you look in the middle line here, the middle red line, that's the field activity itself. What am I doing? And then supporting the field activity or benefiting from the field activity are enterprise systems. So your GIS is an enterprise system, your asset management platform is an enterprise system. And then there are FieldTech systems such as drones, et cetera, 3D cameras that we will use in the field to handle our unique requirements. Before we ever set foot in the field, we're going to assemble information that helps us do this, right? We're going to assemble information from the GIS, from the field service management or platform that gives us tasking. We're going to pull in maybe information from 3D cameras or drone data, imagery that we're going to use to help identify what we're supposed to do. We're going to assemble that information for the field worker before we ever step out into the field. While we're out in the field, there's frequently a certain amount of two-way interaction. How do I get sensor data to the field? Instead of having somebody type in with two thumbs, you know, it's kind of a nice day and it's not too cloudy and it's warmish, you know, we can call a local weather center that says, you know, it's 72 degrees out and cloud cover is you know, 7% or whatever it is. You get much more accurate data. And the person in the field then doesn't have to type in with two thumbs, which always slows them down, and they dislike it very much. Certain other kinds of services might be out there, web services and so on. We might also, as I said, when we identify a problem, we might want to send alerts, or we might want to see where the closest point to us from a different area is. So, you know, how close is the nearest county boundary? I can make a dynamic ArcGIS call, for example, out to you know, Esri's product ArcGIS, to be able to get that information dynamically, and then I know exactly where I have to go to next, for example. And then finally, once I've done that in the field, and I've both gotten information from the field and pushed information out from the field while I'm out there doing the work, when I'm all done, and this may be record at time, it doesn't mean it happens at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 7 o'clock at night. It can happen, you know, as a particular task is completed. But when I'm done with that task, then I need to be able to push the information that I've collected out to the right places. And you can see all the kinds of places that there are here. You know, everything from video storage to a data lake, to make sure that the data that we've collected is in the right place at the right time based on what the work done was. So prior to activity, in activity, and post activity, we need to be able to bring together a lot of this technology to support what we do, to make people more productive, more consistent, and more reliable. So how do we create then an environment that enables the standardization of the field apps and the field processes that we're doing, customization to make sure that we can adapt to the regulatory change that we're engaged in along with other changes, and integration to make sure that we've got the right things going to the right places at the right time and minimizing kinds of errors that come from not having that kind of integration. One thing that we can look at immediately as an issue is what I call the bolt-on problem. Every one of the enterprise applications you see on the left-hand side has a mobile app, right? It's built by people who think for office people, right? These are the Maximo person is really good at asset management, but they are thinking about asset management mostly from the office perspective and not from the field perspective. There is a bolt-on app, an app that is not part of the enterprise app. It's a mobile app called Maximo Mobile, which is just fine for its limited scope, but that gets put out to the people who are out in the field. And that would be fine if that were all the person in the field needed, but that's not what they need. They also need the Esri tool that they're going to be using. They need the Salesforce mobile app that they're going to be using. They need the SAP app, because the processes that they engage with cross these system boundaries. That causes a lot of redundancy. You've got to maybe sometimes type in the same information into more than one app as you go through a single process. Think about how many places where, you know, the asset number is stored when you're doing inspections, for example. It's at least in, you know, Maximo and in your GIS at a minimum, among other places. And then it also causes friction because the person who's out there in the field has to have hardware that can run all of those apps, and you know, IT has to know that the hardware that's out there supports all of those apps, and they know where to call up each of those apps and how to put in the right information into the right fields, the process to follow within each of those apps. It can be very complicated for that person out there. If the job is to install a transformer or to inspect a weir or to do some other kind of task, then you are losing time and losing efficiency by switching around between these apps and doing duplicate data entry and following multiple processes. Typically, upon seeing the problems that people have with those bolt-on apps, people start to to build their own homegrown kind of field technology, right? They say, okay, well, I've got a vision for what it would look like to have a single process in a single app. And once they got the vision in place, they start to work up the specification, they get the funding, right? So they start to build that out, and it looks really good when they first start off. If you've done this before, I am not insulting you. This is the way people think, and a lot of companies go this way, and it makes complete sense to go this way. Until the problem is that when you start to really do the integration work, that can become incredibly complicated. You're doing it for the field, which a lot of these enterprise applications don't really understand fully. So, and IT doesn't really understand fully. So there's this integration problem that gets done for the field. They start to build these apps. This is not something that the field teams themselves can take on. So your IT staff is not a development shop, right? They don't do that for a living. They do everything from telephony to making sure the email runs. But the IT shop then has to have a development wing that's going to be building these homegrown field apps. They have to train people on them. They have to deploy them out to people. And frankly, because the one field app is never enough, right? There's always going to be multiple field processes. They're actually building out a number of apps too. Hopefully there's less duplication across them, but there's still going to be more than one of them. This makes things more complicated because you now have to wait for the IT team, the dev shop, to start to get to the point where they can actually respond to your requirements. If there's a simple requirement that you realize you need now that it's been deployed that you didn't know you needed before, you still might have to get behind a whole bunch of other people who have other requirements as well. So this is complicated. It's hard. And although it makes sense as a first cut, I understand why people do it, there has to be a better way. The fact is, this doesn't fit with regulatory change because of technological issues. First, the lack of agility, getting in line behind other people, the slow adoption of new technology. The IT shop, like I said, maybe they've got a piece of there, which is the kind of the dev wing of the IT shop, but they don't know everything. They may not have the latest and greatest AI technology in place. I mentioned our audio fast fill. That takes a lot of development by a lot of people to get that right. So the odds of you being able to get something like that in your own technology is really low. That's just one example of many different kinds of new technologies that can be complicated. Developers call that tech debt. If you ever hear that term, it means that it's stuff that they know that they should update, know that they should upgrade, but they just don't have the time because there's too much on their plates. What that causes over time is the reversion to paper. People say, well, the thing that I have doesn't do what I need it to do, so I'm going to collect some or all of the data that I need to on paper. And now you've got the worst of both worlds. You've got the slowness and error-prone problems with paper, and you've got the difficulty with the technology, maintaining all of that technology you've built. The result of this is a business impact where you can't serve your clients effectively, your decision making isn't as good because your data is not as good, and you're going to fall behind the competition. And then finally, of course, the high cost of making sure this stuff keeps going over the course of many, many months. So homegrown solutions and regulatory change just don't fit together very well because those homegrown solutions end up being too slow to adapt and too complex to work and too costly to build and maintain. What's interesting to note is that the issues that we're talking about here are all issues that platforms solve. And all those people on the left, your Maximos and SAPs and Esris and everything else, they either have been the platform, like Esri is a platform, or they work with platforms, have platforms to solve the exact kinds of problems that we're talking about. Software platforms are common in the Office ecosystem because they specifically provide the rigor of process standardization built into the platform, an easy way to create rigorous processes. And then when you have a process, you're able to rapidly customize it. The platforms are almost always designed specifically to deal with these two problems. And along the way, of course, they have to deal with integration in order to bring together all of the different elements that are working. So one of the issues that we face with field organizations is that they just don't have something that that office teams have always had, which is some kind of software platform that's dedicated to them and their specific set of problems. So we can adopt field software platforms to help deliver better service to clients, getting that real-time data and the agility to outperform the alternatives that we've talked about, like the bolt-ons and the homegrown solutions, because we now have a place to do the standardization, customization, and integration that we need in order to keep up with all the change that's being thrown at us. And cost containment too, of course. Just this caught the attention of Lynn Schneider, who's a research director from IDC. This is a new, relatively new market category, but she said just recently that for CIOs, digital transformation leaders, who are trying to streamline field operations, right? We're always talking about productivity. So that's one of the major issues we're dealing with. Location-enabled field process and data collection platforms, right? That's a mouthful, but it's what we've been talking about. Location-enabled, because that GIS stuff is so important to us, field process and data collection platform. It's transformative, and it's going to drive efficiency, flexibility, ensure data accuracy, all things that you need to manage, as we talked about, for that regulatory compliance, regardless of where the change in regulations is coming from, and regardless of what effect it's going to have on the business that you need to do over the course of the next 3, 6, 12 months. Oh, and yeah, there is a white paper in the attachments that talks specifically about this kind of platform. So with that, I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about Fulcrum, and then I can open it up for Q&A. Fulcrum, like I said, we're a vendor, we have our perspective, but the perspective that we have, I like to think, comes from the number of clients that we have that are leading the field, no pun intended, in innovation, in customer service, and in adopting digital technologies that really make a difference to them. And so that's where this perspective comes from, and that's the reason for us doing what we do. It's why we choose to do and choose to build what we build at Fulcrum. The problem that we most often see is that field teams have inefficient tools and they're struggling with them and trying to make them work. You can see the person who's over here, he's got his laptop out, which is not necessarily ideal for a field organization, but he's still got to talk to somebody on the phone. He may have another device somewhere with some other kind of app on it. And all of that together, it's supposed to help him, but it actually causes more frustration than help. That's the problem. Our solution is to create a field-first platform. Literally everything we do is focused on what's best for the field, because that's where we want to boost productivity and that's where we want to streamline operations. Just to give you one sense of how being field first can change your thinking, when people talk about using AI in the kind of platform that we've built, when they talk to office teams, they're frequently talking about using AI to build apps. How am I going to build an app using AI? Sounds great. I mean, there's a lot of work that's been done in code development and stuff like that using AI, but that shaves off what? Couple hours for a couple developers, maybe it's a week for a couple of developers, but you've got teams of people out in the field, and like I said, it's $230 or something per truck per hour out in the field doing work. If you could save them 10 minutes per inspection or 3 minutes per inspection, that's actually going to save much more money in the long term than a couple of weeks on the dev side is going to save them. The real benefit here is focusing on where the impact is, and that's in the field. Fulcrum is a field-first platform, and everything we do is focused on boosting productivity and streamlining operations. Our AI is therefore not focused on how do I build an app faster, although that's in discussion and where we could fit into our roadmap. But our first AI product was about eliminating faces in photos so that people don't have to do that manually, so that we can comply with privacy laws. And the second one was that audio fast fill I described before, where you speak and it fills out your form for you. That's the kind of thing that really has an impact on those people in the field. So the field first platform is the most critical aspect of what we do. That standardization, customization, and integration for the field, I could talk to that all day long. You probably would not be surprised by that at this point. But the point is that we are focused on, because it's field first, the standardization, customization, and integration is all related to field activities. It includes the integration, for example, of FieldTech, which is something that many people don't even understand. We had a prospect recently ask us, for example, to put to take the heat data from a sensor of the tip of a drill and put that into a Fulcrum app. How do we monitor that sensor and make sure that that gets collected along with the rest of the data for that drilling organization? That kind of thing is something that, frankly, most non-field people don't understand, wouldn't be able to get. But we do also have to understand what's happening behind the scenes. We work closely across all of our customers with the people who are responsible for again, asset management I bring up because we talk about that constantly, but also field service management. GIS is almost goes without saying, enterprise resource planning, and so on. So all of that integration working together to serve ultimately the person who's standing boots on the ground out there in the field. If you take a look at Fulcrum, well, this is true whether you are a customer or whether you have not used Fulcrum in the past before at all. I encourage you to look at some of the many Fulcrum features that enable you to be more productive in the field than you would be otherwise. One that's very clear is the geospatial focus. If you don't have geospatial use cases, then the value of Fulcrum won't be nearly as clear at the very beginning of what you do. You'll say, well, I know other things that can do this, but almost nothing on the market can handle the geospatial capabilities, can handle the geospatial requirements the way that Fulcrum can. So if you are in an industry that has a geospatial component, take a look at what Fulcrum can do for you there, whether you want people who are not GIS experts to be able to collect line and polygon data to help capture good data out in the field and bring it back to the office, whether you are trying to give those people better context and trying to give them information out of your GIS, all of those things are really crucially important to making things as productive as possible. We're a member of the Esri Partner Network at the silver level, so we've been through a lot of work with Esri and with the ArcGIS platforms, both online and enterprise. The next is ease of use. I've talked a little bit about AI. What you can see here is is kind of a schematic of what happens using our audio fast fill capability. You speak into it and it fills out the form for you. That kind of ease of use where we're focused on making sure that the person standing in the field is as productive as humanly possible. That is the reason for being of what we do. And then finally, that platform scalability. Not only do we have the ability to handle all of the data you could possibly want, even video and photos and other kinds of information like that, but we also do focus on that admin scalability. How do we work with single sign-on and SCIM and all of the other capabilities and requirements to make sure that the managers of your system have an easy time of managing all those people out in the field, as well as making sure it's good for the field itself. When we talk to our clients, they frequently tell us that the impact that they see is something like, these are round numbers, obviously, but if they spend $1,000 with us, they can expect somewhere between $8,000 and $18,000 returned to them as a benefit. It might be in the form of increased business that they get, or it might be in the form of reduced cost of people out in trucks, for example. So regardless of where it comes from, whether it's a savings or whether it's an increase in business, they expect to see that kind of ROI. Frequently, as you can see here, we're talking about 22 to 5 hours saved per employee per day sometimes. These are numbers that are taken from success stories. So this is actual company feedback that they've seen, that kind of feedback. Your mileage may vary, of course, but this is not uncommon to see that kind of productivity enhancement. And the same thing here, true with a 25% increased capacity or staff reduction for a lot of these organizations. So the client impact is huge, regardless of the way that you measure that client impact. And I think, again, I just want to close by saying that everything I'm talking about doesn't come from me in a vacuum. It comes from our clients, because our clients called on us to help them be innovators. These are customers of ours who are setting the standard in their fields for providing the services that they do at the cost that they do, or with the quality that they do, or whatever their particular differentiator is. They rely on technology in order to make them the most effective in their markets. And we take a lot of pride in that. We learn a lot of lessons from them. I mean, one of them, Trek, they're in the lower right-hand corner of the screen here. You might not have heard of them before, but they do a ton of work in water. So manhole inspections, pipe inspections, things of that sort. And the way that they brought together 3D cameras, Fulcrum, and Esri ArcGIS all together into one system to help them massively improve the speed at which they did pipe inspections and the documentation they get out of it and so much more, just blew my mind when I saw it. They've got a success story out there on the website. Not all of these do, but some of them do. Southern California Edison has one, for example. Just go check it out. It's just some amazing stuff that they've done, and I'm really proud of what our customers have done and our part in supporting them in their innovations. And with that, I'm going to close for questions. While I give you a minute or two to enter questions into that box on your interface. I'd just like to offer that if you are a Fulcrum client, I would ask you to reach out to your account exec if you want a demo of that audio fast fill capability I talked about, or any of our recent advancements in GIS capabilities. I've found that our clients don't always know. We try to communicate out to you, but one email looks a lot like every other email, right? So sometimes you don't always recognize the capabilities that we built in. We've made huge advancements, especially in GIS over the past year and a half. It's definitely worth coming and talking to us about that. So reach out to your account executive if you haven't, and you're a Fulcrum client. If you're not yet a Fulcrum client, then please contact us for a free demo. We'd be happy to consider your specific industry. We take a look at your use cases. There may be some sample apps that we've already got available in our app gallery. There may be some ways that we can really tailor what we want to talk about to you and your specific problems. And we'd be definitely happy to do that. Regardless of who you are, if you're going to any of these 4 conferences, we've got some more planned out for the rest of the years, but these are the next ones. Next week is DistribuTech, March 24th, and as you can see, the Esri User Conference, ISE Expo, and WEFTech, all of those are happening imminently. So with that, I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Let me come and see if I can see the questions that have currently been submitted. 1 second. Okay, I've got a couple and I've got like 9 minutes. So if you've got questions, get them in, but I will otherwise answer these and we'll be good. If I already have a platform that includes mobile app dev, why would I add Fulcrum? So I think the question here comes from the fact that it's mobile app dev. So if you can already do mobile app dev and Fulcrum does mobile app dev, why would you add Fulcrum in? I think the real answer for that is the field first aspect of what Fulcrum does. If you have a generic mobile app platform, let's take Microsoft Power Apps as an example. Great product, a lot of our customers have it, a lot of our customers use it. And you can do literally anything in Power Apps. So no worries about the power there. But doing the things that are required to support the field are complicated in some ways. Go look at the documentation, for example, to geotag a photo. If you're taking a photo in Power Apps, how do I geotag it? Try to figure out what it would take for you to collect a line or a polygon in Power Apps. You could do it. There's no doubt you could do it, but it would be done by a developer who would have to learn some geospatially specific stuff in Power Apps, and it would be done in a fairly complex way as far as these things go. If you look at what Fulcrum does, we expect that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, a field team, somebody who has the skills necessary to manage a spreadsheet, should be able to create an app that the field would use. The majority of their process is going to be built by that kind of a person. They know the process, they know the business. The technology is less important to them than what the process is itself. They can easily require that you add lines or polygons to the record that you're collecting. They don't have to do any additional work to do that. They can easily add fields and take it off. They don't have to go back to IT to get that kind of work done. IT is still going to be involved for things like single sign-on, security, integration. Like, you're going to have IT involvement, and don't ever walk away from that. Don't alienate that team. But if you have Power Apps, and then that's a developer tool that's going to be used by developers. If you have Fulcrum, then that is a field platform that's going to be used by the field team to manage what the field team does. And those are just two different things. It's much more powerful. It's much easier the field team is much more powerful, I should say, and it's just much easier to build out what you need to with Fulcrum. What I recommend doing is take a look at the kind of app that you would build out, the kind of process that you would build out, and see what it is that you would have to do to get that job done in Power Apps. Like, just figure out what the spec would look like, and then figure out what it would look like in Fulcrum, and just compare the two. And I think what you'll find is that for most situations that the field needs, the Fulcrum side is going to be simpler to do. You won't be able to do, you can do almost anything in Fulcrum too. It's incredibly powerful. But to do that kind of the work that you would do in Fulcrum that you would do in Power Apps, it's going to be significantly, that would be more work to do something that is really out there. But for what the field team needs, Fulcrum is going to cover. It's more than the 80-20 rule. It's the 90-10 rule or something. And Yeah, I mean, try it. It's worth trying. Get a demo, check it out. It's well worth seeing. Are you acting as the GIS in these scenarios? No. So this is kind of a subtle question, and it might be coming from a GIS person. So let me make sure I'm clear here. A geospatial information system or geographic information system is typically used by people to get the geospatial data they need so that they can do things like build maps, dashboards, do calculations, do analysis. It's really about understanding what's going on. Fulcrum is more about the operations, right? So if you think about what a typical Fulcrum task is, it's go out and do the following thing: install the transformer, inspect the pump, that sort of work. It's very operational. So analytics, if you think about the analytical work that gets done from a geospatial perspective, that's all going to happen in ArcGIS. If you think about the operational work that's going to happen, that's all the stuff that can happen in Fulcrum. So the data from Fulcrum that's necessary to do analytics, that's going to be pushed out of Fulcrum into the GIS. And the data that people need operationally out in the field, the people who are actually doing the work who need to know, am I on this side of the boundary or that side of the boundary? That's going to be pulled from ArcGIS out into Fulcrum. So Fulcrum is the system of record for the field and includes geospatial technology, geospatial capabilities, but is not acting as a GIS. The GIS is the system of record for all geospatial information that is needed to be done for analysis, right? So it's a system of analytics, a system of inquiry versus a system of record for the field. I hope that made sense. I know it's a lot of words, but hopefully that made some kind of sense. Please feel free to ask another question if I didn't make that clear. And here comes another question. Speaking of which, can I use Fulcrum for all mobile app dev? So the first question is all about, if I already have mobile app dev, why do I need Fulcrum? This is kind of the inverse of that. If I have Fulcrum, do I need all mobile app dev? You can do a ton with Fulcrum. I would say that the place where you want to use Fulcrum as a basic app dev capability, your go-to tool for app dev, is for situations where you've got processes that don't necessarily require a lot of IT considerations, right? You can build enterprise asset management capabilities and all that sort of stuff into Fulcrum, but if you were to do something like a DVIR, right, a daily vehicle inspection report, there's no requirement for geospatial capabilities or AI, or probably not even for significant integration in that case. Could you build that in Fulcrum? Absolutely. Very simple to do. We've actually got one out on the website that you could try as part of a trial or a demo. I would say that for Fulcrum, you would probably want to look at us first if you have geospatial requirements or other requirements that are going to need that platform aspect of what we do. If you have that, then Fulcrum is going to be worth it. If not, then there's a bunch of other cheap stuff out there. Like there's a bunch of point tools that can do data collection in a fairly simple way. Go look at those too. If you have both requirements, you've got both the heavy duty, pole inspection requirement where there's a lot of geospatial requirements in there, utility network kind of work that gets put down to the platform so that people can use that to figure out which transformer blew, all that kind of information. If you've got that kind of work for 100 people, and then you've got 1,000 people that would do just basic mobile app dev, like not, the DVIR kind of stuff, you could, then we'd probably negotiate something to make it worth your while to have all of that on Fulcrum. I don't see the bigger mobile app dev platforms going away, like your Power Apps or your OutSystems and things like that. Those are probably still going to be there because those are developer tools. So for Fulcrum, for all mobile app dev, I would say you're still going to have the need for developer tools out there sometimes. And with Fulcrum, you're really focused on non-developer or light developer application development instead of those more IT-oriented platforms. We are coming up on time, so if there are any more questions, please feel free to send them to me or to Fulcrum. In the meantime, I really appreciate the attention that you've all given us for the last hour. I know there's other stuff you could have done, and I appreciate you spending the time with me. And if you have any additional follow-up, then again, please feel free to reach out. Thank you very much, and have a great day.